In today's episode from our 2022 Enduro Bike Roundup, we will be taking a look at the Fezzari La Sal Peak.
Welcome everybody to the 2022 Enduro Bike Shootout. Right here we have the Fezzari La Sal Peak, one of the 8 contestants in our test of the best enduro bikes on the market.
All right, so Fezzari has made quite a name for themselves in offering affordable but pretty dang good performing bikes. They are a consumer direct brand out of Utah, and we have spent quite a bit of time on this bike as well as many of the others. Back when we did a dissected on this earlier in the spring when it first released. Since then we put on some Marzocchi suspension, so we've been able to ride this as well as many other bikes in both a coil and air spring configuration, that's the word, thank you. It's been a long day, guys. Let's get into the geo of this bike. I find it to be really good for all around. Some pros, some cons, but let's dive into a couple of the numbers here real quick.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of commonalities between a lot of the bikes. 64-degree head angle is one of them. Pretty ubiquitous except for a couple of outliers. The BB drop is 26.7 on this bike, which is a little lower than the 30 number that we're seeing on a lot.
So it has adjustable geo, which will take the bottom bracket drop from roughly 26.5 to 30.
Yep, and it'll probably steepen the head angle a little bit when you go to that high position.
Yeah.
Chainstays are 437, I believe. And seat angle's nice and steep, like around 77, which is pretty typical for all these. The reach number is 485, right?
It's a yeah.
485.
Yes, it is a 485 reach on this.
Another similar number.
But it does feel short.
It does feel
That's kind of
short.
why I had to re-look at my list.
Yeah.
It like, the Cannondale's a 475, but it almost feels longer than this. I don't quite know why that is.
Yeah, so I'll say like being on the tall end for a lot of these larges at 6'3", I feel like maybe I'm more sensitive to the sizing of them because I'm not like in the middle of the range. I'm on the high end for them, but I do like that smaller bike. This one felt really small to me at first. Maybe because it's got like a kind of short wheelbase with that shorter chainstay. Once I increased the stack a bit, just like raised the spacers up and got like a bit more roomy on the bike, it felt better. And then I did notice that like once you're on trail, like kind of like tucked into the bike a bit more, it feels fine.
Yeah, it's mostly the more high-speed, open, kind of big bike parky berm sections where you just kind of feel like you're over the front a lot more. But yeah, once you start getting low and attacking some of that gnarlier terrain, the bike really starts feeling good.
It does.
I mean, I will say it doesn't even need to get into that to feel good. Where some of the bikes you really got to push them on that race pace to get it to come alive. I think this is probably one of the best all-around bikes in the group test that you don't have to be an expert or a privateer pro racer to get the benefit out of. I think if anything, it probably favors more of that newer rider to that intermediate advanced level rider who wants to go out, pedal, get some big miles in, wants a little bit of stability and safety from that extra travel, but still wants to come rip a bike park day here and there and have a little fun on some gnarly stuff.
No doubt. Yeah, to me, this and the Orbea Rayon have a lot of similarities in terms of how they feel.
Interesting.
They both pedal really well. I think they're like probably the 2 best pedalers on test.
I'm with you.
The geo is similar between the two for the most part. Actually, like everything except the chainstay and BB are really similar. The Rayon wants to be pushed, like that's the racing bike, and this is like ride it everywhere, have a like good time even on chill trails bike. This bike was forgiving, like it was just comfortable. Yeah, as you said, like this is the one that if you're not trying to ride gnarly terrain all the time, maybe you do ride like generally pretty tame trails, but you just want like a large buffer in terms of suspension travel, it would be good for that. That being said, if you were doing that, I'd maybe go with a different spec than like full EXT suspension. But
yeah, and that's kind of one of the cool things about Fezzari is that they offer a very easily customizable buying experience. You know, when we got this bike from Fezzari, you know, they said, what do you want for wheels? What do you want for suspension? What do you want for brakes? And we were able to build it, you know, the way we were excited to try it, you know, and how we wanted to experience it. What was cool is that as much as we like this bike and as fun as it is, you know, in a bike park setting and maybe on some really rough and rowdy stuff, when we took this off and put a Marzocchi Z1 and the Bomber Air rear shock on, which are, you know, some much more budget friendly air suspension products, the bike was, I would say, almost as capable everywhere, and it maybe even got a little bit more fun in certain areas. So like, you know, the non-bike park terrain, I know Sour Patch spent a lot of time pedaling this bike on some of the lower trails, more the jumpy, flowy, you know, kind of, you know, trails down low, and the bike was almost a little faster in those terrain or scenarios because you could pump it a little bit more and maintain its speed. The EXT stuff's very cool, but it's very plush, and it definitely, I don't want to say it eats up speed, but it eats up the terrain, right? Yeah. Whereas like that firmer air shock really lets you kind of maximize some of this fun and efficiency out of the bike that yields itself in good pedaling characteristics, as well as just a lot of fun and snappiness out on the trail. It feels like it's a pretty stiff frame laterally as well. So cornering it is fun. Most of the time, I felt like, and we talked about it, that it kind of felt like the center of gravity was a touch high in some certain like kind of awkward corner instances. And I don't know if that's in my head, but I kind of felt like if the trail was just the right or wrong combination, I had a little bit of a hard time struggling to get the bike to lean over.
It just wants to stand up more. Like, it's not like, it's nothing with Geo except maybe the shorter chain stays. It's just because it is that like pretty supportive platform, it like, as soon as you push into a corner, it wants to stand up, which can be nice if you're like stringing together a bunch of pumpy sections. But when you're trying to like make it hold on through like a long chattery corner or in like a long rock garden that's kind of steep, it does want to stand up. And like for that reason, if I were racing this bike, I'd go coil. It felt like, to me, this felt like a coil bike because it's still like super energetic, climbs really well with the coil on there. Like a lot of other bikes, you throw a coil on and it like dulls everything, kind of makes it feel a bit dumb unless you're really pushing it. But on this, like, I don't know, like this would be super fun on those pedal trails still. With this like super Gucci coil shock and like a very, what could be a very plush linear fork. You can, the cool thing about the EXT fork is you can make it feel super different depending on how you tune it. But not the most stable bike, but not like skittery, just a bit more sporty feeling, I guess.
Yeah, I do think that probably if you are like the very upper tier, right? If you're like racing enduro in BC, maybe like super gnarly, steep, chunky stuff, you know, maybe some of those guys in Europe, there might be a bike that's maybe a little bit more capable in those extreme bits of terrain, but I think that this bike excels in everything but that and below.
For sure.
Better than some and many of the others in the roundup. And I think that's probably why this is a bike I would recommend for a lot of people.
Multifaceted.
More, right?
Yeah, so we've talked ride impressions, Geo, all that. We should talk budget and build kit, because that's a big part of what makes Fezzari unique. It's the fact that you can customize pretty much everything on the bike. We've got the pretty high-end model here coming in at, what, 8 grand? With this spec, 8,000 bucks. You get EXT suspension front and rear. Axis drivetrain, carbon synthesis wheels.
TRP brakes, which is sweet.
So like a bunch of like unique and super impressive components. The build kits for like their pro line start in like the low 6,000 range. So generally it offers a pretty good budget. Like for this build, 8 grand is expensive, but you're getting like probably the most expensive and fancy suspension on the market. Like that fork alone is 2 grand. It's not necessarily like $1,000 better than like a Lyric or a 38 or a Zeb, but it's really good. I was super impressed with this stuff. It's like a very, very adjustable suspension platform, front and rear, but even for me, like hopping on this bike, it felt really good pretty quickly. I liked that. Trp brakes are great. Otherwise, nothing too stand out on it. The frame feels high quality. I think that's worth mentioning. Like it doesn't feel like a budget frame.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. So who would you, I guess, recommend this bike to, or your, I should say, have you ever ridden a Fezzari before?
No, this is my first Fezzari.
Okay,
I rode one for like 5 minutes at Sea Otter years ago, but.
So your first time on a Fezzari, what'd you think?
I'm impressed. I remember when they came out as a brand and like the Fezzari Ferrari thing was awkward and no one really knew who they were coming to market. They've made a name for themselves, and I think this bike kind of proves that. Like it's one of the most well-rounded bikes we have here on test. I think for people who want something that can go fast but isn't speed focused, it's like well-rounded, fun in a variety of terrain. This is a killer bike. It's got 170 mil of suspension, which is a good buffer, but it doesn't feel like this like big gushy 170 bike.
Right.
It's got like the sportiness of something with much lower travel. That does come to bite you if you're really trying to push it on like the ragged edge, because then it's like it doesn't feel like a super big gushy bike, but it handles that stuff. Like you could race this, you could play on it,
and you can go out for a big ride.
Yeah.
And you could do none of those things and just have a longer travel bike that just rides well everywhere and is still fun to ride and pretty dang efficient. So,
yeah. And it comes in purple.
Yeah,
which is
I know. I love purple.
I love purple.
Right on. Well, thank you guys very much for watching. That is the Fezzari La Sal Peak, a very well-rounded and capable long travel 29er that I think would definitely be a bike we would suggest a lot of people take a closer look at. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Stay tuned for the grand finale as we see how this bike compares to the other 7 bikes in our Enduro roundup. Thanks very much, and we'll see you out on the trails.